you got to do. What you want to do is you're going to add these symbols to your template. Okay, so you're going to go into your AutoCAD template and you're going to draw these things. So this first one is the circuit breaker. And this is what you want to draw. And you want to have an ID number for it because they're usually numbered in the breaker panel. And you want to have that over to the right, and then over to the left you want to have what the max braking capacity is of that thing, and then how much you're using. And the symbol looks like that. Sometimes you'll have switches on things, to like switch a rack on and off, like on a power conditioner. So this is the drawing for a switch. Sometimes our power conditioners have little lights or lamps on them so that you can see in the dark. And those draw a little bit of current, usually about 0.5 amp if they're the incandescent ones. So you're going to want to have that on there and make a drawing for this. These are just standard electrical symbols. I didn't make these up. But this is for a lamp, okay? And you want to have, again, how much it draws. This is just your little dot that we use to indicate like an actual spliced wire, or copper touches copper. These are the symbols for specific receptacles. So you got singleplex, duplex, fourplex, and then a special. So that one on the wall there is a duplex because you got 2 Edisons on there. If there were 4, it would be a fourplex. If there was only 1, it would be a singleplex. And if you look at the drawing here, I'm doing singleplex on the power conditioner, right? Because it's just individual receptacles. But then, like here, I'm doing a quadplex because there's a quad box on the wall that I'm using, okay? So I know there's actually 4 there. And then if it's anything besides that, you're just going to do this symbol, the little triangle inside of a circle, to indicate this is some kind of special connector. This could indicate like some kind of twist lock connector, or maybe even a power con or something, if you've seen those. And you would want to have a little label next to it just to explain what that is. Like, what is that? In what way is it special? What kind of connector is it? For example, I just put it's some sort of 3-pin twist lock. I didn't know which one it was at the time, so I just put that label so I knew what it might look like when I find it. Okay. And beyond that, you're going to want to make just a little standard, this kind of device block here for the type of equipment, like kind of what kind of thing is it, the make and the model, and how many amps it draws. It pulls out of the wall. And then you should be able to go in and draw something like this. You're going to use your text styles. If you need to make bigger styles, you can. These little rectangles sort of are used to group things together. So if you're going to group some breakers together in a panel, you'll use this rectangle to indicate this is all one panel, and you can put a label in it. Okay? Or this is all one power conditioner, and you put all the things in there. I'll talk you through this little part here. These Surgex conditioners have this switch that shuts off power to everything, but there's one or two, there are actually 2 receptacles on this power conditioner that are wired before the switch, which means they're always on. So if you flip the switch, it shuts off everything that is hooked up to the switch, but there's those 2 receptacles that will always stay on. That's really good for things like computers or things that you don't want to have shut off, without being shut down first. Yeah.
Will it say on the box?
Mm-hmm. Yep, it'll tell you. They're usually labeled. Like if you go into Catawba and find the wireless rack for Great Comet, they've got one of these at the top of that rack. And there's there's 2 network switches in that, and those are plugged into the always on.
Oh, that thing. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm with you now.
And the receivers are on the switched one. So if you switch that thing off, the receivers will turn off, but the network switches won't. And that's like on purpose, so that those network switches stay on, since they're running a lot of other stuff that isn't necessarily in that rack. Okay. All right. Other questions? So I don't need you to fully understand this drawing yet. That will come when you have to actually make one on a show. That's when you'll start to understand what it is, when you have to trace the power for your system and start drawing this. But what I do need you to do is make sure you have these symbols in your template and practice making a drawing that looks like this. So if we look at the assignment, which is the power diagram assignment, I say, okay, add these symbols to your template, and then use your template to make this drawing. So I have that drawing that I've just taken you through as an image that you can download, and I want you to recreate this. Okay. One thing I want to point out is that I am using line weights. Can you see that? How these lines are thicker than those lines? The idea here is I have the lines that actually represent the electricity thicker than the lines that don't represent electricity. I think that looks nicer, and it helps me to focus on the important stuff. So I would suggest thinking about that too, is think about how you want to use line weights. So I turn on line weight preview here, you can see kind of how that works. And I drew them that way in my template as well. Yeah? So something to think about. Okay, questions? Yes?
Is there an easy way to do like the dashed lines?
Ah, good question. Okay, so a dashed line. This is called a line type. So I'm going to make a line. Okay. Now, oops. I forget what the command is for this. But if you go to the format menu here and go line types, I guess it is just line type. Here you can do types of lines just like you can do types of points and text styles and all that kind of stuff. So you can do lines. Here's the ones I have loaded right now, but you can go in and hit a plus button and there's all kinds of different dots and dashed lines, okay? So you find the one you want, stick it in there, and then once you have it, you can select it, and then over here on line type, you can either have a line type for a layer, or you can do a line type per device, or per object. So you could do the dashed 2, and that's that. Now, one thing to watch out for is how these scale when you put them in paper space. Because if you end up shrinking this drawing considerably to stick it in a piece of paper, that line type is going to try to scale in a way that lets it look right, and it is rarely going to get that correct. So, for example, let me just make one here. And there we go. So look at, if I put this in monochrome, and display with plot styles. Okay, you see how that dashed line now is like really big? The dashes got bigger. So what you're going to want to do is select that, and you're going to want to go to the line type scale here and change that scale. And we're going to need to go down like 0.25 maybe, so that it scales correctly in paper space. Now, the best way to do this would probably be to create a separate layer for your dashed lines. And that way you can set that on a layer basis. Let me see if there's a way to do that. This line weight. Oh, actually, I don't know if you can do that. I'll have to look that up. You may have to do it by the object. But if you go to line type scale, when you get to paper space, see how it scales when you play it in there. And if it's looking weird, then flip yourself into the model view, select it, and adjust the line type scale. And that way it'll look right when you plot it. Yep.
Like this one, does it matter which paper size we use?
So the paper size, the choice for paper size should be dictated by the height of the text. Okay, so it's all about, can I read that text if I do it at that size? And let me turn this on, see if it'll display it this time. There we go. So, if I go find the smallest text here, the question really is, like, how big is that in this view? And if I try to measure that, I get 0.001, that should be inches. So 3/32 is kind of like the rule of thumb here. It should be 0.093, so that's going to be a little small. So I'm probably going to want this to be on a bigger piece of paper. So if I take it up to 11 by 17, and I can make my viewport a little bit bigger. Leave room for my title block. Zoom. Flip over to paper space. All right, let's try it now. That'll work. That says 0.14, so that should be legible now.
And for the title block, I think I was getting confused with the width of it, because of the line. Do you do it from the line on the end of the page, or do you do it by the actual end of the page?
Anything that's outside this dashed line is not going to show up when you hit plot.
Okay.
So this dashed line is showing you what's called the printable area.
Yeah.
So, the printer, in this case, the DWG to PDF printer, just isn't going to draw anything outside of that, because that's the limitations of the mechanics of the printer. It just can't go all the way to the edge.
So it is okay that it's like that. It looks small from here, but I'm guessing it'll print out bigger.
It should. Well, this is why if you go in and measure it, you can get a sense of how tall it is. That's 0.01, or no, 0.11. So that should work. We can do a quick plot and see. What that will look like. Yeah, it's still a little small with that line weight. So I either got to reduce the line weight or I got to go to a bigger piece of paper. So you could fix it in some ways by going into the line weight. I lost my layers. There we go. So I could reduce my line weight if I want. For my text, it's defaulting to whatever the what is my default line weight? 0.25. So I could go into like my text ones and I can make those smaller line weight. I could take it down to like 0.15 for my text layers, and then it won't bleed as much. So there's various ways of dealing with that. A little bit of it, it's a little bit of trial and error, for sure. I mean, these days we hardly ever actually put any of this on real paper. I like to have it at a load in on paper, but I'm just old and maybe it's more comfortable to me. But at the very least, you ought to be able to zoom into it on a PDF and still be able to read it, right? So if you do this and it's still bleeding, then at that point you should go ahead and mess with those line weights and try to fix it. All right, so what are you turning in? You are going to turn in a revised copy of your template that has these symbols drawn in it, and I want a DWG file with that power diagram, okay? And that's what you're going to turn in. Questions? Okay. You have an hour to start working on this.